Are back. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have to do some retitling with the videos once I launch this again. Um, I don't know why it's showing it as unstable. Um, but what I was going to get at before I was rudely interrupted by my connection is the fact that this that when it comes to the second act, that is where you essentially have full on viable colonies set up on several planets. Um, due to the actions of the Pathfinder. I know that there was the whole quest to add up to 100% viability, um, which just results in a applause at the end when you've done that a bunch of times. The approach that I would take instead is Zan, before he left, had brought up the whole thing of a tech tree. I think that can be done with the forward operating bases and then the way the eventual cities develop in Act 2. It would require a bunch of potential variation, but I wouldn't do it in look, but rather what sort of things you can access in terms of equipment, in terms of additional party members, because I would have a combination of recruits, which are just NPC kind of party members, and legit named characters. Because the idea with this is you've got a bunch of people. You'd have a bunch of people that you're bringing along with you. Some of them you can, some of them you can't. As the expansion goes on. Because in Dragon Age 2, you had those time skips during certain acts. I would lean into that a little bit with a bit of a purpose. But instead of the conflict being surviving, this is where you have the Wild West. You know, you have settlements, but there's still threats. And in this case, this is where you would introduce the overarching, which is a different type of interstellar kind of organization, whether you want it to be an empire or kingdom, but some interstellar thing that is not happy about you stepping on their turf, even if by accident, and they're not willing to compromise. I think that'd be the outline for the second act. That the colonies have been established, but now some people don't like the fact that you're on their turf.
I mean, I think in the game proper, the idea of the Ket, being an empire, in the Andromeda Galaxy is not a bad idea. It's just executed really poorly. Because instead of it coming across as them being like an empire, like on the level of the Protheans, it just comes across as them just picking on the Angara, just one race, and it doesn't feel like they're an empire.
That and the whole transformation from Angara to Ket, like I said, it's just husks and a different coat of paint.
Yeah. Also, this is just subjective, but I would rename them. I wouldn't call them the Ket. It's just not intimidating.
Mm-hmm. Which would you have the names flipped?
Maybe, but Angara does. I don't know. It just doesn't sound aggressive enough to be like the name of an empire.
Mm-hmm. And I know it would be tempting to have it be a bunch of converted races. I wouldn't do that either, because we already did that with the different types of monsters that the Reapers make.
Yeah.
I think it should be a empire just with a bunch of different uh, specialized units, still keeping in with the theme that we mentioned regarding the combat loop.
Yeah, and I would actually take a page out of A New Hope, where the Empire in A New Hope, they subjugated most of the galaxy not through like an iron fist, but through incentives, so that like the other races would be under this empire not because they've been forced to, but because the empire made such a good deal that they're willing to go along with the authoritarianism.
I can go with that, especially since it avoids the mustache twirling problem that can happen.
Yeah.
So, in keeping with that, I think the other aspect that should be put into consideration is whatever we're renaming the cat. I would actually give them something akin to some of the tech and biotic powers that the player facing side has, which would force you to change up your tactics with them.
Yeah. They would be what TV tropes calls the wake up fight.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just them, shooting at you or something like that. It's them using things like cryo or pyro, or them. I wouldn't have them directly use some things like push or pull when it comes to biotics, but possibly put in biotic traps, i.e., you stand in one place too long and then you get pushed.
I'd say I'd go further and say I would give them straight up push and pull. I would make them use it like very conservatively to avoid like being really annoying, but I would allow it to be like they use push or pull and it's incredibly telegraphed, so that if you get hit by it, it's your fault.
This is
But I would
what's
have it be
known in
like
design as signposting.
yeah, like I would go full send it, like they will ragdoll you if you get caught by push.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, I wouldn't have it that like a whole squad has it. It's specialized enemies that have it.
Yeah,
and those special enemies are telegraphed in their design so that they're a priority target.
yeah.
But it's a common motif of taking the kit that you already have and turning it against you. This is the reason why so many people like the fights against Virgil in Devil May Cry 3, because he essentially is using similar tactics to you, even if he has a different kit.
Yeah, and then in story wise, it would also make the Empire seem like a dark mirror of the Andromeda Initiative, where it's like they have all of the tech and all of the infrastructure that you've been trying to build, but it's way more advanced than yours.
Mm-hmm. I know that there was the whole thing with remnants and that not being explained, but somehow being key. Which the remnants just felt like Prothean tech in a different coat of paint.
Yeah.
I think on some, and I'm not entirely sure how much, if that's going to be kept. I think there should be some explanation of what the hell it is, aside from ancient tech.
I think if we could, you could make the remnant like what the Empire used to be before it turned authoritarian. Like instead of it being an empire, it was a prosperous kingdom where everyone worked in harmony, but then something happened that caused the kingdom to turn into an empire.
For whatever reason, there's this idea in my mind of the old empire was akin to the Roman Empire, and the newer one akin to like the Byzantines or the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, like at some point, it would also add a little bit air of like realism to it, because no authoritarian government starts from just like they just decided to be mean one day. Like it's usually a slow burn.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose in that regard, um, I would go with the idea that what became the Ket, which even if we change that name, the old form that they had was in a different form. Was something that expanded across, that had territory in multiple clusters in the Andromeda galaxy, but due to decline and other factors, ended up shrinking massively. And instead of the twist being the Angara are just the Ket are just modified Angara, the twist is that so many of the worlds that you've been exploring were former old Empire worlds with their old tech. Essentially, the Empire as is has been on a crusade to reclaim what they believe was theirs.
Yeah.
And that puts things into conflict, because their approach is your stuff has been ours for this planet has been ours for thousands of years. We are reclaiming it, and you have no say in it. Is the attitude that they end up having. It's a way to have that kind of empire without retreading what came before. Excuse me. Because one of the big things that doing this kind of story arc should avoid is not fully retreading what came before. Callbacks are one thing, but you shouldn't do it too much, because it's supposed to be a new start. So a whole new galaxy, a whole new set of threats, all of that. And I know that the big remnant boss fights that you saw, I would still keep those, but just have it that what those are very old defense systems that are still semi-active. And that's also a reason why, like, the locals wouldn't go near those places. Because if they go near those places, they turn into a fine pink mist. And when it comes to the conflict, it's more of the issue of what to do when it comes to these established colonies, because by this point you can reasonably assume that the colonies have been there for years. So it's not like you can just have them pack up and go somewhere else. Which that somewhere else might be on the other side of the galaxy, which by that point they wouldn't have the means to move that far. Because because since it was a one-way trip, there was never any intent of moving to someplace else once a colony had been established. With Act 3, that is where you have the open conflict between the different colonies and the allies that you've made up to that point against this empire. And if you want to do follow-ups, you don't have to have it that the empire is taken out, just driven back. If you want to do follow-ups. Because when I was considering this outline, it wasn't in a 3-game trilogy thing, because that's counting your chickens before they hatch. But more of a here's the way you can do things, but leave a few loose ends that could be explored if the opportunity comes.
Okay.
Because
now what I would add is maybe make it so that the war in the third act is what the audience is aware we're building up to.
Mm-hmm.
Probably by the end of the first act, that the audience understands that they're heading towards war, and the audience is just waiting for what the casus belli is going to be.
And I would say the Casus Belli, and this is something that you would not have direct involvement with, but a scout ship going into a certain area and accidentally coming across a garrison of that empire, but their presence is treated as an attack, and they end up shooting the thing down, even though it was a completely it was not a military vessel. It was just a scout. It was just scouting a particular spot in space. And that's what ends up leading to things hitting the fan. That's one possibility of what the Casus Belli could be. And do you have a alternative?
Well, it depends on the Casus Belli. Would have to depend on what exactly do you want your character Alec, like, would Alec want the war or would they not want the war? That the Casus Belli has to be based off of that.
I think the approach would be and it would vary depending on interpretation, but I feel like the way Alec is built and kind of the stuff we've hinted at, it'd be a case of not wanting conflict, but if it does come, but being prepared for if it does come.
Okay, in that case, I'd say if he doesn't want the war, then the Casus Belli would have to be something really big. Because like a scout ship getting destroyed, he could just be like, I get it. There was a miscommunication. We'll just try to make things work out. But it has to be something like direct and like in his face, and it's like, I can't let that go unanswered.
In that case, what about a direct attack on one of the colonies itself?
Yeah, something like that would be more so like would push him to like actually want war at that point. Because if he's taking the defensive, like we don't want war unless we have to, then a scout ship just going, missing or being destroyed is going to be like, well, that was an accident. But I don't want war, so I'll just let it slide.
Yeah, I will admit when it comes to the idea of a colony attack, I am doing a bit of a callback to when the Reapers first show up on Earth. Because that is the kind of excessiveness that I think would be necessary in that situation.
Yeah, especially because the attack on the colony or the attack on Earth was like probably one of the most shocking and intense imagery in the series.
Especially since leading up to that, his superiors doubted that the Reapers, even if they are coming, it would take way too long for them to reach Earth. i.e. the threat of the Reapers the Systems Alliance wasn't taking the threat of the Reapers seriously enough.
Yeah. And I think another thing that could help is making the colony attack on a place that the cast views in like great reverence. Like say for like Earth, when Earth was attacked by the Reapers, I don't really need to explain why Earth getting attacked by the Reapers is a big deal and why all the humans hold it in reverence. But for the Andromeda cast, it has to be a place that like they hold it in reference. Like say this is like the beginning of the third act, so it's like the first colony and it's been built up to be like the size of like a city on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it getting attacked is like a huge, like, it's a big deal because it's the first one. So it would have to be something that like the cast holds in great reverence.
Yeah. And that particular third act, I'd say one of the big arcs that would be involved in that is getting some of the races that you've had first contact with already on your side. Which I know that is somewhat retreading what we saw in Mass Effect 3 with the whole getting everybody war ready. But in this case, it's more of convincing them that if they get rid of us, they're not going to stop at us.
I'd say to take a bit of a different approach, maybe instead of like because I'd say more so like it could be like persuading them that the side that they think is in the right, like you could be spending a lot of the third act trying to convince people that are Empire sycophants that the Empire isn't as good as they think it is, and that like the Empire allows a lot of injustices to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gets them to join your side in a sense of rebellion, rather than like a last stand against the Reapers. It's more of a rebellion rising up against an empire.
I could definitely see that, especially since that allows for the potential to have that same kind of bringing different people together, but not just replicating what we had before, which is again something that is important to avoid.
Yeah, because with Andromeda in its current state, it's basically the Force Awakens for Mass Effect.
And I do remember when we talked about our reconstruction of the sequel trilogy, we had said the Force Awakens felt too much like it was trying to replicate the New Hope.
Yeah.
Mostly because J.J. Abrams is nothing but member berries, and I've called him the California role of film directors. But that's a story that I've gone over in the past. I do think in the aftermath, that is, the Coda should be reestablishing contact with the Milky Way galaxy, and not necessarily the showing of, but the beginning of building a mass relay that goes back, giving the implication of that the first steps towards establishing a route between the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies is established.
Okay.
You don't have to show like ships going from one galaxy to another, but just the fact that we're starting to build this, we're starting to have that connection, so that people who may not have seen people from the Milky Way in decades will have that opportunity soon. We already talked about the Wild West. This is where we see the first steps of the Wild West being tamed. This is the equivalent of, say, the Continental Railroad being made.
Yeah, and at that point, me personally, I would just end the series there, to be completely honest.
Yeah, because there's no. If you want to continue with more of with an escalating conflict between said empire, you can, but there's not really a need to.
Yeah, like I'm a big advocate of just let the story stop where it is. You don't have to keep going.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of writer and showrunner Riku Sanjo, who handled things like Kamen Rider Double. And something that he likes to do in his endings is not do a definitive no other stories are happening kind of ending, but showcasing that while that story is over, the story of those characters isn't. Their story is going to continue on in its own way. Essentially, time still passes onward, and that's why leaving it off with the first steps of that gateway back is where I would lean. And in doing so, we have a game that has a clear direction on how it's set up, has a combat loop that is reinforcing a particular style that isn't just recreating what came before, as well as a 3-act structure that has its own identity that isn't going to be conflated with the original trilogy.
Yep. And then at that point, it's just down to execution.
Mm-hmm. And within all of that, you also have the possibility of, if you really want to expand it, you can. I wouldn't recommend it, but there's a blueprint that can be followed. Now, if you follow it and it sucks, well, that's on you.
Yeah.
But with that said, that is going. I think that about covers everything we could cover with this one. This was certainly an interesting affair. It's going to be a total of 3 hours at the end of it, even with the technical problems that we had at the end. Sorry about that, folks. My recording setup decided that it wanted to crap out at me at the worst possible time, and I had to go through a full reset. But it is what it is. But with that said, we will be back here next week with something different for GeekWatch. In fact, let me look at the schedule. Oh, that'll be interesting. And of course we'll be. I'll certainly have a lot of stuff happening. I'm gonna be going live later tonight with a new interview, and possibly later after that with more of FF16. I'll see where my head's at that point. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.